Formula E is back. We've got new cars, new teams, and a lot of driver changes for season 11. And in this video, we're not only going to talk about all of these topics, but we're also going to have a brief look into the results of the preseason test and also a little predictions for the season at the end. And I think we shouldn't lose too much time. So let's start with the things that have changed over the summer break. As a lot of you might know, Formula E has introduced its Gen 3 Evo car already last season, but they've now made some additional changes to it. They've not only brought in a more robust and newer chassis, but also a new front wing and some more stickier tires from the tire manufacturer Hankook. But of course the biggest revolution on these new cars is the four-wheel drive system, which the drivers are allowed to use during the start of the race and for their qualifying laps. Because the series did not only change their cars, they also looked at their rulebook and tried to implement one or two new things. And one of these new rules is a sort of extra point that you can gain when you lead on a certain lap of the race. But this lap isn't just chosen by any human, it's chosen randomly and is being published by the race director before the start of the race. But I personally don't know what to think of this new rule. Because for me, it seems like there are still a lot of questions that need to be answered first. Like, what if there is a safety car or a yellow flag or a red flag? What happens then? What if a race is suspended? Who will get this extra point? Or will this extra point then just not be awarded to someone? But besides this new rule to get an extra point during the race, Formula E has also reacted to the more and more hand injuries that have occurred over the last couple of seasons, like with Sam Bird at the Monaco E-Prix last season. And there are two possible solutions for this problem. One is a steering damper that is put into the steering, but it might affect the way the cars handle, which would mean for the drivers that would have to find out how to steer these new cars with the steering damper. And the other one is a carbon insert into the driver's gloves, so that if the car crashes and the driver's hands get thrown off the wheel and, for example, hit the cockpit walls, they don't hurt themselves because they've got this carbon insert into their gloves. And while we're already at it, let's have a closer look at what has happened on the driver market during the off-season. Because if you compare the grids from season 10 and season 11, you might realize that there are a lot of driver changes that have happened over the summer break. In fact, only 3 teams have carried on with their driver pairing from season 10. And first let's talk about the drivers that are not going to be on the season 11 grid. Namely Jehan Daruvala, who has left Maserati MSG, and Sasha Venestras, who left Nissan. They are both going to be replaced by Stoffel Vandoorne, who joins the Maserati MSG team, and Norman Nato, who's going to join Nissan. So this then meant that not only Maserati would have to find a second new driver, making it a completely new driver lineup for season 11, but also Abt would now have to find another new driver. Luckily for Maserati, Jake Hughes decided to leave McLaren after just 2 seasons and to join the blue-colored team. And for Abt, it's going to be a very special season, as they are now rebranded and in a cooperation with not only Lola, but also Yokohama. But Abt didn't go the classical way of choosing an already experienced driver in Formula E. They rather went into the junior series and chose Zane Maloney, which is a current Formula 2 driver, to drive for them in season 11. And this is a very rare recursion, that a Formula 2 driver joins Formula E instead of just climbing the ladder up to Formula 1, because he seems to have better chances in the premier racing class of electrical racing. But they're not the only team to choose a Formula 2 driver as their second driver for season 11, as Neil McLaren decided to sign Taylor Barnard as their new driver. Both of them had relatively good seasons in Formula 2, and I'm personally very excited to see how they are going to deal with the swap from Formula 2 to Formula E car, which seems to be a little bit different to drive. And I'm also happy to see that Formula E seems to be able to sign their first real young drivers, and not only some experienced drivers who've already shown what they can do in other racing series. We can't leave this section without mentioning the situation at the ERT team. As you might be familiar, the team hasn't published its driver lineup for season 11, and apparently they still seem to be not quite sure who's going to drive for them in season 11, as they've signed 2 test drivers for the preseason tests in Madrid, with Dan Ticktum and David Backman. But I don't quite understand why they don't just sign them up as normal drivers for season 11. I mean, they now have done the complete test with the team and know the car very well, so why not give them the possibility to show their knowledge on the track in season 11? I mean, every other driver that you bring in now has less experience with the car and the team, so it would make sense to me at least to sign him up for the whole season. But I guess I shouldn't speculate about things I don't really know. But what I do know is that we're going to see a new team in the form of Lola in Season 11. And although they're only joining the already existing app team, I think it is very exciting to see them finally come back into a racing series since their last adventure that was the MasterCard Lola team in 1997. But we will get back to that later in my predictions, because not only is going to return a team to single-seater series, we're also going to see 2 tracks return to the Formula E grid. And these 2 are going to be the Miami E-Prix, which has been part in the beginning of the series, and the Jakarta E-Prix, which comes back into the calendar after a pause of 1 year. And with all of these new things, I was very excited to see the pre-season test happen in Valencia. But unfortunately, as many of you might know, massive floods have hit the southern parts of Spain and especially Valencia. As a consequence of that, and to give the people in Valencia less things to worry about, Formula E has decided to move the testing vacancies from Valencia to Madrid, which I think is a good thing because the people back there really have to worry about something else than Formula E cars going around the track. And although the test schedule was pushed 1 day back in order to react to these quickly changing circumstances, we were finally able to see the cars on track on November 5th for the first time. But the first interesting thing of testing didn't happen on track, but rather off it, as Jaguar and Nissan were both not allowed to take part in the first test session due to procedural and minor overspent breaches. So this meant that we were only able to see 20 instead of 22 cars in the first test session. And because nothing really happened on this test day, Antonio Felix da Costa finished the first day of testing with a 129.220 in P1. On day 2 though, a little bit of drama happened on track relatively early as Sam Bird came to a stop at turn 1. Fortunately for the Briton, this wasn't the end of his testing day and he could get some more valuable data for the team to work with. But he wasn't the only one to bring out the red flags, because Nick Cassidy had to stop his Jaguar on the start-finish straight towards the end of the session, which meant that he had to walk back to the pits. But besides these 2 situations, nothing really happened on day 2. And so we were able to see Jake Hughes in P1 in the morning session and Maximilian Günther to close the day with a 128.408 as the fastest driver of the day. And apparently Günther and Hughes don't seem to have any problems getting to grips with the new car relatively easy, although they have switched teams, which I'm very happy about for these 2 because it could mean that we see a closer championship this season. Day 3 saw finally a little bit different in the schedule, as although the morning session was a typical test session, the afternoon session saw a full race simulation with all 22 cars on the grid to finally battle each other for the first time this season. And what you could see pretty much immediately from this race simulation is that basically the whole pack was very compact together, which meant that they were running in a big queue for the whole race simulation. And to be honest, I think this is very exciting because it could mean that we see even closer action in Season 11 on track. And one thing you could also see is that Porsche, Penske and Maserati seem to be the strongest teams in this test. And for me, they also seem like relatively good title contenders, of course besides Jaguar. And with nothing else that was really worth mentioning, we were excited to look forward on the last day of testing. And here, we could finally see Jaguar come back to the top of the timing sheets as Mitch Evans finished the last day of testing with a 127.4. And although the preseason tests seemed to be relatively quiet, it just shows how reliable these cars are compared to other series like Formula 1. But this wasn't the only thing that happened this day on track, as the women's test took place in the afternoon, giving them a chance to drive a Formula E car for the first time. And here, Abby Pulling was able to prove her really good form from the F1 Academy season by topping the timing sheets ahead of Jamie Chadwick and Bianca Bustamante. And for me, it is also a really good sign that Formula E gives young women the possibility to drive their car on the official test, something we haven't seen from other racing series like Formula 1 or WEC. And before the end of this video, I want to make a few predictions on Season 11. I've decided on the categories of, well, the Drivers' Champion of course, the Constructors' Champion, the Surprise of the Season, the Disappointment of the Season, and a sort of hot take. So let's start with the Drivers' Champion. And although they seem to be able to always throw their title opportunities away, I think that this season, Nick Cassidy is finally going to win the Formula E World Championship. And although I think that Jaguar are finally able to get a big title in their bag, I don't think they are going to be able to defend their Constructors' Championship. And this season we're going to see German manufacturer Porsche win the title just because they seem to be really dominant, and already last season they were very strong, and I didn't see anyone else really beating them. For my surprise, I don't really know if it's a real surprise, but I say he will perform better than most of us think, even though he's swapped teams. And for me, it's not Jake Hughes, it is his teammate, Stoffel Van Dorn. Because I think with his experience and with his determination to getting good results, I think we can see a few good finishes here and there from him in this season. Unfortunately, the same can't be said about McLaren, because I think that they're not going to finish really well this season. They didn't really seem that strong in testing, not really worth mentioning, and with one of their drivers being a rookie to the series, it might be possible that he might have 1 or 2 bad finishes or DNFs, which is completely normal for a rookie, but nothing you want in order to win the Constructors' title. And although it seems very obvious, my season's hot take is that Lola, yes Lola, are going to win at least one race this season. Doesn't matter if it is from Degrassi or from Zane Maloney, I think that they will be on the top step of the podium once this season. And if you want to learn more about why Formula E doesn't have any classical rear brakes anymore, check out this video up here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.